How do you overcome imposter syndrome? How do you overcome the self doubt that is so much a part of imposter syndrome? I'm going to talk about that a little bit in this video. I'm Dr. Seth, psychologist. I'll start by explaining what imposter syndrome is. I have to say, just from the beginning, imposter syndrome, it sounds bad just from the sound of it, imposter. My association is, a psychological thriller. Cue the music starting in the background, imposter syndrome. Well, imposter syndrome is not a clinical term just to begin with. It is not in the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, but there are some overlaps between what imposter syndrome is and other mental health disorders. Let me first kind of explain what we mean when we talk about imposter syndrome. So, imposter syndrome is a psychological pattern of carrying this fear that you are somehow not good enough, don't belong. There is a fear of being exposed as a fraud. Somehow there is social comparison going on. And when you look at your role in comparison to others in your environment, you feel that they have earned their place and that you haven't. So, this is imposter syndrome, a very kind of rough definition. And one of the disorders that it does have some overlap with, I can share, is social anxiety disorder. Social anxiety disorder is a mental health disorder that is recognized in the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual. And part of social anxiety disorder is the feeling that you are being evaluated or scrutinized by others. There is tremendous fear with social anxiety disorder that you may be exposed as not good enough, deficient in some way, that others will see it. So there's no doubt that just because imposter syndrome is not in the DSM, that it is actually a legitimate psychological issue that people deal with. That feeling of being found out, that idea of not being good enough, of feeling anxious and on edge, feeling that others might see your inadequacy. It's real. If you are someone who have imposter syndrome, you feel it firsthand. You know that it's serious. You don't feel that you get to relax in your environment. You don't feel trusting and have faith that the good things that you may have in your life will stay, will remain. You don't feel a lot of times this internal sense of an anchor that you deserve it, that you have earned what you have, that you have earned your role, your place in your environment. Okay. So I'm going to talk about a few kind of different things that you can keep in mind that can help you overcome this imposter syndrome. So, to help you overcome imposter syndrome, I am going to review a few things that can be helpful, a few kind of psychological tools that you can keep in mind and you can honestly work each day. Try to practice chipping away at this negative feeling that is really holding you back from enjoying yourself, enjoying your position, and feeling the confidence that you could otherwise feel if this weren't holding you back. All right. So, the first step in overcoming the self doubt that is a part of imposter syndrome is to make a commitment to engage in logical reasoning as opposed to emotional reasoning. Okay. So take your situation, the way in which you feel that you are an imposter or you're afraid of that. Okay. Ask yourself this: when I have those feelings that I don't belong, that I'm different, that I haven't earned my place here, that others can tell that I don't belong. When you think about that, ask yourself, is that logical reasoning or is that emotional reasoning? Is it logical or is it emotional? If you are dealing with imposter syndrome, you are most likely engaging in emotional reasoning. You are focusing more on feelings. We tell ourselves that just because we feel something or we think something or we believe something so strongly that makes it true. But I always tell people that it's really important to make this distinction. Sometimes something can feel real but also be not true. Real, but not true. There is a dialectic. At the same time, those two things sometimes can be at work. Something may feel real, but not be true. So, when you engage in emotional reasoning, you tell yourself just because you feel something or you believe something so strongly with such ferocity that it's true. But that is often emotional reasoning, and watch out for it, especially when you are telling yourself negative things. We don't want to tell ourselves negative things. When we tell ourselves negative things, it makes us feel worse. So be careful about engaging in emotional reasoning when it comes to the way you doubt yourself with imposter syndrome. The second important step is to try to identify whether there is any cognitive distortion going on, whether there is any distorted belief in your thinking. There are different types of cognitive distortions. One of the cognitive distortions that often is at work with imposter syndrome is a cognitive distortion, a thought distortion that we call all or nothing thinking. So, this is the idea that you either have earned your place and you belong, check yes, or you have not earned your place, you do not belong, check no. That there are only two options and that they are very rigid. And you have to be careful because if you haven't met all the conditions of earning your place, then that means you haven't earned your place at all. Okay. So it is very all or nothing, rigid, black or white thinking. Either you belong 100% or you don't belong at all 100%. Now, we all know the reality that that is not true. That doesn't apply, that there are different shades. There is a spectrum of every single characteristic that you can think of. So, if you're dealing with imposter syndrome, that imposter anxiety, I'll call it, is going to try to make you believe that you don't fit in, that you don't play the part well, that you didn't deserve what you have, that you aren't a natural fit for the circumstances that you're in right now. The imposter syndrome is telling you that you check the box no, you don't fit in, you don't belong. But tell yourself, I am engaging in all or nothing thinking, that I either do belong or I don't belong. And tell yourself that that is too rigid of a bifurcation. And you know what? That rigid bifurcation doesn't exist in the real world. There are all different shades of competence, of capability, of people earning their place. It's simply not realistic to say it's all or nothing. And so your goal is to not engage in distorted thinking, but instead to engage in clear, level headed, and psychologically flexible thinking. Flexible thinking. Okay. The third step in this process of trying to overcome the self doubt, okay, that's a part of imposter syndrome, is to look at the evidence of your circumstances. The evidence, okay? Think about your circumstances from a perspective of data, actual data. So, one of the things that can be really helpful if you're dealing with imposter syndrome is to actually start taking inventory of your strengths. What strengths do you have? What do you bring to the table? Actually, make a list and you can write it down of the strengths that you have. Write down some of the personality characteristics that you have that are strengths. Also, write down and take inventory of some of the things that you have done to try to get to where you are today. Maybe it involves education, maybe it involves training. If you, in some ways, feel like an imposter socially, that is something that a lot of people deal with too. Again, make a list of what you bring to the table. Make a list of the attributes that you have that make you someone who has a valuable contribution. Write down what is positive about you. And finally, the fourth step that I want to highlight today is to show patience with yourself. Give yourself time. If you're dealing with imposter syndrome, it means a lot of times that you are in a situation, you are in circumstances that you're not used to yet, that you have not yet gotten an identity where it matches your circumstances. You may feel like you're supposed to look like you're comfortable in that identity, but it may be really uncomfortable deep down. It's like putting on a pair of shoes and they just don't fit right. Well, what we're talking about is identity development. And sometimes we can be impatient when it comes to our own identity development. You may find yourself wanting to feel comfortable right now, immediately, in this situation, in your role, in these circumstances. You might even have unrealistic expectations about this new identity. Maybe you told yourself that you should feel comfortable in these circumstances when you don't. But let's remove the should from that situation. Let's tell yourself, you know what? I guess I feel kind of uncomfortable in this role. My identity is still forming. I am still a work in progress. I need to have self compassion that I do feel a little anxiety, that I am afraid that I may not match up. I am afraid that maybe I'm not good enough in some ways, or maybe I should be better. But I know that these are natural feelings. I imagine that a lot of people in my circumstances might feel the same way. It's important to remember when you deal with imposter syndrome that you also may be imagining that everyone else feels more comfortable than they do in their circumstances. Actually, I really believe ultimately many of us have our own insecurities deep down. There's a little kid in each one of us that has moments where we feel vulnerable or insecure. And so it's very normal and natural. It is important to normalize some of this anxiety that you have, some of these fears you have, as long as it doesn't cause major interference in your life. If the imposter syndrome is really causing so much anxiety that you're finding that it's having major impairment in your social functioning, in your work functioning, maybe in your school functioning, in a major area of life, then it's really time to consider talking to a mental health professional. But the reality is that a lot of people deal with some of the feelings that come with imposter syndrome. And if they can be patient with themselves, give themselves time for their identity to catch up with their circumstances, they can find themselves feeling more a part of the club, more belonging. Some people, it just takes them a little bit more time. I hope this video has been helpful. And if it has, you may find some other videos on my YouTube channel, Dr. Seth Psychologist, ones that could maybe help give you a little insight, or maybe there's some wisdom in them that you can take with you and apply to your own life in healthy ways. All right. Have a good one, everybody, and I'll see you next time.